We want to welcome everybody to this new edition of the Drum Candy Podcast. It's such a pleasure to be here, and we have one of the great masters with us today, one of the great masters of both the drums and of Brazilian music and Brazilian jazz, the great Duduka de Fonseca. Welcome, Duduka. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's great
Yeah,
to be
man.
here.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to talking with you. And I wanted to start today by sort of going all the way back with you. You were born in Rio de Janeiro, correct?
Yeah, I was born in Rio a long time ago in 1951.
1951. That's great, man. So, just so everybody sort of understands, you and your journey, how did you come to the drums? How did you first start playing?
Well, since I was very little, like under 10 years old, a neighbor, used to play, a father of a friend of ours used to play brushes, Mr. Ville. And I was fascinated by, he used to play, with that song, Jeremy Richards song,
Uh-huh.
so I had this single, and I always, look at that brush, and I was like, wow, I want to play like that. And all the time in class, in the classroom and everything, I was always, playing with my hands in the where I was supposed to be writing, taking notes. And when I was 13 in 1964, my mother and my brother, went to downtown Rio, and with a friend of mine that's not with us anymore is Marcos Palma, and he's the brother of the great drummer João Palma, that we live in the same street. And João Palma was the one that's played with, in my opinion, the best albums of Antonio Carlos Jobim. And he also played with Brazil 66, you know, and he lived a long time in the United States. And we were neighbors, so I learned a lot from him. He was my idol at the time. And he was already a professional drummer. And Ipanema at that time was completely different. In the 50s and 60s was completely different than it is now.
Mm.
Also, my mom, Norma, my mother, loved to listen to Chet Baker, to Louis Armstrong, to Nat King Cole, to Frank Sinatra, Jerry Mulligan, and so many others. She loved jazz,
Hmm.
and Ray Charles, and at the same time, she used to listen to Antonio Carlos Jobim and João Gilberto and Johnny Alf and Dorival Caymmi, Luis Bonfa, and all the great Brazilian greats. So I grew up with that sound, you know, the jazz and the samba that's already the Brazilian rhythms that already in my blood. And since I was a kid, I want to mix, in equal parts, you know, not one serving the other, but mix in equal parts, and make make something mixing with those two cultures. And
Hmm.
that's I'm 71. That's what I'm still trying to do until now. So, my mother, Norma, was very responsible. She's 93.
Wow.
She's 93, and now she learned how to talk on FaceTime, and we talk every day.
Wow.
And so, uh, and she met Chet Baker. She met in France. She used to be, in the 50s and 60s, a very independent woman. What was very rare
Hmm.
in the United States and in Brazil was even more, because like being a South American macho country, that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
But she worked, because my father was João Luis was Air Force pilot for the Brazilian Air Force,
Oh, wow.
and my mother always worked her whole life. She always had things to do, and she
Mm-hmm.
was very independent woman at that time, which was very rare, you know. And she helped the whole family with that, doing her work.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of her, and I'm a big fan of her.
Yeah.
And
That's wonderful, man.
that's helped me to develop my passion for the jazz. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like I said, João Palma, the great drummer João Palma, that plays with Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66 and Jobim, and many other ones, Frank Sinatra recorded. And I went, his parents' house was right 100 meters from my house in Ipanema.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother and myself used to be the best friends with his younger brother. So we went there almost every day to listen to jazz, to Wynton Kelly, to Thelonious Monk, to Coltrane, to all, Philly Joe, Jimmy Cobb, to Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, to hear all that music. And his house, parents' house, was a meeting point for all the Brazilian musicians that time they were older than me, like Edson Machado, the great drummer Edson Machado,
Mm-hmm.
that innovated Brazilian jazz, on the drums, and Dom Romão and Raul de Souza, Milton Banana. So
Mm.
when I was 15, I met all those guys that were my idols.
Wow.
And they
Wow.
still, they, they most of them, they're not with us anymore. But I used to go there and with my brother and with Marcos, the brother of João Palma that lived there,
Mm-hmm.
and we listened to music all the time. And by
Mm.
coincidence, his sister, João Palma's sister, was the fiancée of Dori Caymmi, a great composer.
Oh, yes.
So Dori was always there too. So we used to
Wow.
hang, and I used to play soccer with Dori when I was a kid in the beach, Ipanema Beach.
Wow.
So, and after a while, I said I had a girlfriend, and I said I want to go to United States to play with American jazz musicians and to blend both cultures.
Yeah.
And my plan first was going to Boston because all my friends like Claudio Roditi, Vitor Assis Brasil, Zeca Assunção, everybody, Claudio Caribé, a fantastic drummer that's not with us anymore. My God, the time flies, no? And they
Yeah.
all went to Boston, and then from Boston to New York. They came to
Gotcha.
New York. And I said, let's go to Boston. And then my girlfriend at the time said to me, no, let's go straight to New York. Is that what you want to do, right? So don't be afraid. Let's go straight to New York. I said, okay, because she wants to study communication also at the
Okay.
Hunter College.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay. So we came to New York, and right after I arrived here, you know, I arrived in December of 75, December
Mm.
18 of 1975. I was 24 years old, and 24 going 25. And right a couple, 3 months after, I got invited to do a recording session in Los Angeles. So a friend of mine called me, that piano player, Aloysia Aguiar, that's also not with us anymore, a great piano player, called me, a childhood friend, and have a big production, not his album. but a big production album, and he invited me to be part of the album. So I got there to LA. I just arrived in New York, and I said, my God. Then I had a chance to meet. In the recording was like, for instance, Harvey Mason. I
Mm.
played two tracks with Harvey. He's playing funk. I was playing Baião. It's like,
Wow.
I play tum, tum, dum, dum, tum, dum. And really, the things work out. He wanted to buy a
Wow.
cymbal of me. At that time, I was completely broken, and he wanted to buy a cymbal. And I said, no, no, no. This is one I don't want to sell. And
I know that feeling.
and, but Frank Rossolino, Raul de Souza,
Wow.
and what's the name of the bass player that used to play with Victor Feldman too? I mean, many
Yeah.
Chuck, many great musicians, all the top, of the LA, music industry was there, and it
Mm-hmm.
was great. I say like. I love at that time. I love LA. Now I have a
Yeah.
daughter and two grandsons, one grandson and one granddaughter living there.
Wow. That's
And
wonderful.
my daughter, the older one, Alana, from my first marriage,
Mm-hmm.
she writes music. She graduated SUNY Purchase. She writes. I was first married with an American lady, and
Mm-hmm.
Alana writes music for Walt Disney, among many movies.
Wow.
you know
That's
she's
amazing.
doing so well.
Yeah.
I say at least someone in the family make really money with music, because she's like a millionaire. She's writing so
Yeah.
much.
Good
And
for her,
my
man.
younger daughter, my daughter with Mausha, Mausha,
Yes, of course.
Mausha, the singer. My younger daughter Isabella, she also graduates from SUNY Purchase, upstate New
Mm-hmm.
York, and is
Yes.
working at Birdland as a sound woman at Birdland.
Oh,
And
wow.
she
That's
works
wonderful.
with Ron Carter, with Bill Charlap, with every. She worked this weekend. She was working with Steve Smith in the Birdland Theater downstairs, and
Mm-hmm.
with Brazilian, great composer Marcos Valle that was singing there
Ah.
upstairs. She was working downstairs and upstairs, and
Wow, man. She's busy. That's great,
yeah,
man.
she's a great, brilliant sound woman, and
Wow.
she's 24 years old, you know, but she
Wow.
has
Good
some
for her. Yeah,
ears, and
yeah.
she doesn't like. Alan and her are the best friends. My older daughter and Isabella are best friends. But she doesn't. She likes more to mix live music, and she also play drums. They both play drums. But Isabella has a
Wow.
band play drums. She just was in a tour for 2 weeks. So
Okay.
I'm very
Yeah.
proud of both of them. But getting back to my thing, then I was in LA. I did this album with those guys, and I came back to New York, and I said, man, I was 25 years old, more or less 24, 25. I said, I made it in New York. That's it. I made it in America. So I went out and bought my dream set of drums, a Gretsch, that right now is in Brazil at my brother's
Okay.
house. I have a couple of drums there when I go there to play. And I said, man, I can't believe it. I make it. And then after that, I say like 1 year or more than 1 year with hardly any work,
Oh, man.
was like, wow. It was either rice or beans, not rice and beans, But I don't regret. It was a great time, and I learned a lot, Uh,
That's great,
a good
man.
friend of mine, a great drummer, that at that time divorced, but he remarried. He's now the husband of the great singer composer Joyce. Maybe you know Joyce.
Yes.
His name is
Yes.
Tucci Moreno. He came. I invited
Yes.
him because he divorced. His wife left him. I invited him to live with me and my girlfriend. I had a 2-bedroom apartment in the West Village, so we lived
Mm,
like many years together. And then Joyce
wow.
come here to United States to open a club, you know, in the Upper East Side from the French Mafia. I used to play there too, and they
Wow.
fell in love because he was playing there. And then soon
Yes.
Joyce was living in my house too. And then Joyce went to Brazil, and he followed her. He went to Brazil, and they
Ah,
married for I don't know 40 years more than since
yeah. Wow.
1977, 78, something like that.
Wow, man. I wanted to ask you in your early years of playing, both when you were still in Brazil and then after you got to New York. What were some of the things that you were practicing, that you were working on as a drummer? Could you talk a little bit about that? What are some of the things that you were doing back then?
Well, Tom, I'm like self-taught. My
Yes.
practicing was watching at the time. Bossa Nova was really strong in Brazil at that time, 1965, 64, 65, when I started to play. And by watching my idols at the time, drummers, I I play without stop. I used to play like 12 hours a day, but I never
Mm.
study, you know, formally. I always,
Mm-hmm.
you know, develop my own, way of practicing. And that's what I do is
Mm-hmm.
still doing now, you know. At the
Yeah.
time, I used to play a
Yeah.
lot with the albums,
Yes.
in the gramophone, right? And I put the albums that I love and I play with a lot, not only Brazilians, but uh, all the Brazilians and the Americans, like Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, Chick Corea, and McCoy Tyner Inception, and John Coltrane, and
Mm.
Miles, and Wynton Kelly. And I play Wes Montgomery, you know. I play with all of those, I have a big collection and many Wayne
Yeah.
Shorter a lot, all those old Blue
Sure.
Note albums with Elvin Jones and Richard Davis in
Sure.
some, and McCoy
Mm-hmm.
Tyner, and
Yes.
it was my way. And at the same time, doing gigs at 16. My brother played bass, used to play bass, and he had a
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend that plays piano, beautiful blonde, and great piano player. At that time, it was very unusual. It's not now. You see Eliane Elias, right, playing, and all those, But in Brazil, it wasn't very common, and we made a big
Uh-huh.
success. Like we had that bossa jazz trio in
Yeah.
1966. We play on TV all over the bossa nova shows in Rio. We were kids,
Mm-hmm.
playing all over town and on TV too.
Yeah.
But going back, my way to practice was doing things that think about the idea and doing things that uh, think about practicing things that I want to do that come to my mind, you know,
Mm-hmm.
not like
Sure.
one time Michael Lauren, a great friend from Drummers Collective, where I used to teach
Mm-hmm.
for almost 20 years, he told me, Duduka, some people, they know the rudiments and they play, but some other people, they don't know, written, but you play all the rudiments, but, you know,
Yes, you do.
and I never, formally studied. I'm not
Yeah,
proud
yeah.
of that. I'm just saying what's happened to me.
Yeah,
That's
no,
my
I
life,
think I think it's a great thing to be. Yeah, to be self-taught is not a bad thing. I mean, you've developed your own personal style from that, which is
Yes,
wonderful.
I did it, and I still pursuing, to develop more and more.
Mm.
and to get better and better. So I love practicing. I practice whenever I can, every day, and I love
Yeah.
practicing. And
Yeah.
sometimes, for endurance, I practice some things that are difficult, supposing the snare
Mm-hmm.
or something that are difficult, that demand, you know, strength,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I do that because as you're getting older, you need to keep that the muscles and everything,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. When you first got to New York and you first started working, who were some of the first American jazz musicians that you worked with when you got
okay,
here?
when I got here, you know, uh, the Brazilian jazz scene was more or less dead. We had like
Ah, okay.
Ayrton Moreira in LA doing his thing, but here in New York was very quiet because the
Oh, wow.
bossa
Okay.
nova boom had vanished, at that time. Now it's back again. But at that
Mm-hmm.
time in 75, 76, 77 was so. I play, we had like a handful, maybe two hands, at the most,
Mm-hmm.
of young Brazilian musicians that wanted to do something here. And we together, we're looking for American musicians, you know, and to blend, and play with them. Like one guy that loved Brazilian music and helped us a lot was Walter Booker, the great bass player. He loved Brazilian music.
Yes,
We used to
absolutely.
go to his house. When I say we, is like that group of musicians and stay there, the whole night playing, and had a chance to
Wow.
meet great musicians and play with great musicians there. I had a chance to meet Jimmy
Mm-hmm.
Cobb and Larry Willis, the great late Larry Willis piano player, and many,
Mm-hmm.
many other ones, at Boogie Oogie, the studios that Walter Booker had on the Upper West Side. And
Oh, yeah. Okay.
so the first guy that I remember also Steve Grossman. I don't know if you heard about, he used to play with Elvin Jones together with David Liebman.
Absolutely. Wonderful
Yeah,
tenor player. Yeah.
he loved Brazilian music, and I remember going to his loft on Sixth Avenue and playing, and then it's like a snowball. You start to meet people and start to go ahead,
Sure.
and then you start to record also. You know, I remember that I started recording in the 70s, like 77, 78. I started my thing recording because was
Mm-hmm.
the market was very good for that, the
Yeah.
labels, and they pay well, they have money, and the vinyl at that time before the CD. And I started recording around that time, and I had a very good memory, now not anymore, but a very good memory that I hear the music and I memorize a lot. Some difficult arrangements, I still can
Mm-hmm.
do it, just take more time now. And
Yeah.
uh, and it one thing, and then you start putting bands together. My first band together I put together was in 1980. We went they call Brazilian Express, in
Yes.
1980. But before that, I had recorded with different people, with different bands.
Sure.
And in 1980, I put my first band. I remember that was the great late Dennis Irwin on bass.
Oh, yes.
He
Yeah. He
loved.
loved Brazilian
He was
music.
his encyclopedia of Brazilian music,
Yes.
And we are the best
Yeah.
friends. Those are the first friends when I came to New York. I met Dennis
Uh,
and I met Billy Drews and I met Joe Lovano
Yeah.
and Keith Queen and Jimmy Haddad and Dick Oates, and those are the cats.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm forgetting some that we're still friends until today, and. And that was great, when started playing with them,
Yeah.
with Dennis, and that was the first. Dennis was playing with Blakey, and he said, "Duduka, I'm going to whatever he was going to," and said, "Why don't you put a band together, and I meet you in Texas because we stay like 1 month
Wow.
playing in Texas. We stay in
Wow.
we playing that in Austin first, Austin city limits, and then
Yeah.
after that we play somewhere else, and then we stay 3 weeks in Houston playing in a place, that time. Then the gigs take very long, and it was I put a quartet together, which was Claudio Celso, great guitar player from Brazil, and a piano player that just arrived from Brazil, Paulo Mauricio, arrived from Brazil.
Okay.
He was playing with Elis Regina, the great singer there at the time,
Uh,
and he arrived from Brazil. And I put together. We rehearsed the guitar, piano, and drums. All and we took there. And Dennis, as you can see, could read everything. So we took
oh
the
yeah.
we went to Texas, and we started playing. And then we did Austin city limits first. And my English, is
Yeah.
is not that good now, but at that time was really bad. I remember that after playing the first or second tune at that place, Austin City Limits, I said, "Good night, everybody." And yes, because in Brazil you say boa noite when you're arriving and boa noite when you're leaving.
Yes.
But but in
When you're
America
leaving,
you say
yeah.
good evening and good night when you leave. Good evening when you're arriving. So
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So good night, everybody was like, "What the hell? They just played two tunes, a couple of songs," and was a big thing. So we went to Houston, and they invited us to do a TV program for Houston PBS, and we did. And one
hmm
year later, they sold the program to all the CBS all over. That was 1980, 81. They sold the program. We
Wow.
did in 1980. In the end of 80 or 80, they sold Brazilian Express, and it play all over the United States, with Dennis,
Wow.
and all the cats,
Wow.
Paulo Mauricio and
That's
Claudio
fantastic,
Celso.
man.
So that goes back how many years? 42 years.
40,
42
42
years
years.
ago,
Yeah.
you know. And I remember one
Man.
thing that I don't think is a Zoom interview. I don't need to say, that is not going to sound
Okay.
good.
That's okay. I tell you what, talk about when you started teaching at Drummers Collective in New York, because you were there, as you said, for like 20
Almost,
years, right?
almost, like Bob Winner,
Oh,
my
okay.
dear friend Bob Winner, and the co-author of the book that we have, the Brazilian Rhythms
Yes.
for Drum Set.
For drum set.
It took
Yes.
us 4 years to do the book. And now Bob Winner say because Bob is the intellectual guy, and besides being a fantastic player,
Yes.
and my brother, we're
hmm
so good friends. I love him so much, and we were like brothers, and. He said, "Hey, Duduka, you gotta teach here at Drummers Collect." I said, "Bob, I never taught before. I never teach before, and I don't think it's a good idea. I don't read music. I never teach. You gotta teach. You gotta teach. You gotta." He stayed 2 years on my case or something like that. You gotta teach.
Wow.
And then I said, "Okay." Since when I started, I was like insecure, so I took a percussion player with me. The first one that I took was a Ciro
Okay.
Batista. Is a Ciro, is a guy that played percussion. Excellent, a good friend. We had a band together,
Yes.
for
hmm
many years, New York Samba Band, and I took him because it felt more comfortable for me. Explaining things between drums and percussion. And then I started to feel more confident, And then I took Guilherme Franco, also another great percussion player, you know. And
Absolutely.
it was great. So the interaction in Baião between, the percussion and in samba and this, and partido alto, and whatever, maracatu, whatever the rhythms. And I said, okay. And then I started to feel better and more confident, that insecurity went away. And I'm going to start to teach by
Yeah.
myself, And it was great because it gave me much more knowledge what I was doing since I never had a formal study. I never studied formally, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It started to give more knowledge because the students ask, "What are you doing with your right hand? What are you doing with your left hand?" I said, "I don't know, so I need to
Yeah.
stop and think, what I was doing."
Yeah.
And then I show a pattern with the right hand. I show a pattern with the left hand. And then the next day, one student come, "Hey, Duduka, how about if you mix that pattern of the right hand, the second pattern with that pattern, the left hand?" I said, "Man, that sounds better than I was. They start to mixing things. And
Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
it was a great experience. And I'm very
That's
fortunate
wonderful, man.
to teach there for 16, 17 years. But in the end, I
Wow.
think I still teaching when I go out, to do master class. But I love when I go to Europe or someplace. But even in the United States. But I love to do with a rhythm session because I can show the pattern on the drums, and then I can see that how it can
Yep.
work with the bass and piano or guitar and piano.
Yes.
Uh, and that's the
Yeah.
way I start, at Drummers Collect. And then I stayed there for,
Wow.
I told you 16, 17 years. And and then my younger
Yeah.
daughter born, and Isabella, that's now 24, 20. And
Yeah.
I started to think I'm repeating too much myself, and I wasn't feeling good with that
Ah.
because I found a formula that works,
Yes.
about sticking and orchestration. I can send to you. You're gonna see it's good. Once you learn a
Yeah. Yeah.
sticking by the way you orchestrate around the drums, you can create different patterns, different
Yes.
textures, and everything. It really
Mm-hmm.
works. But I said after a few years, I said,
Yeah.
"Boy, I'm repeating too much myself." Even though it's a valid thing, I said I think I
Mm-hmm.
was feeling a little anxiety, or I said, "You know what? I think it's better for me to take a time." And my daughter was born in two, a
Yeah.
younger daughter, Isabella.
Yeah.
I said, "I'm
Yeah.
gonna take time, take a time." And the book,
Well,
that I did with Bob, we did together, was like he used to come to my basement. I had a basement studio in the basement of in the West Village, and he used to come. I play, he take notes. I play, he take notes. I play, he take notes. We talk about things. We stay there, and after years of that, doing that, we went to the studio, a very fun studio downtown New York, Manhattan. And Bob said,
yep.
"Okay, let's do it." And was like 106,
Yeah.
107 extra pattern exercise. And Bob, a lot. And Bob was
There's
in
a
the
lot.
booth, and say, "Okay,
Yeah.
exercise number whatever, X, with the hi-hat 0, 0."
Yeah.
And then he count one, two,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, tuck, ska, tuck, whatever, what was.
Yeah. It- we should probably let people know that the book you're talking about is Brazilian Rhythms for Drum Set, which you put out with Bob, which is really it's sort of the modern day Bible
Oh,
of
thank you.
Brazilian
Thank you.
drumming for drum set. Oh man, it's a marvelous book. I use it myself, and if you don't own it, all the drummers who might be watching and listening,
Yeah,
you definitely need to get a copy of it because you'll learn all of the
this is
essentials of
good
this
because
music.
the book, Tom, is still selling today. So we did
Good.
that. and we did so many. We spent so much time. It took us 4 years to do the thing. So, and we sent. I sent to Antonio Carlos Jobim. I sent to Ayrton, and we sent to Steve Gadd for them to write. You know, and I didn't send to
Sure.
Steve Gadd. Ciro Batista was playing with Paul Simon. He gave the blueprint of the book to Steve, and Steve,
Wow.
he read the whole thing because said everything sounds good, but and John Riley had done the transcription, the final transcriptions, because John can hear
Okay.
everything. He's great, he's excellent,
He's very good at
and
that. Yeah.
Steve said on page 22 and 23 we have a little mistakes, in the writing, you know, and it was.
Wow.
So it's because he read the
Wow.
thing, and he said on page 23, everything is good. On page 23, you can fix that, no problem. And also the second thing is,
Yeah.
if you're playing 2/4, why are you counting 4/4? Because Bob used to count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, tagaraga, 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 And I said, Bob, he's right. I said, no, no, no. Because when you're in the live gig, we usually count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and play samba, or bayan or whatever you play.
Right.
But
Right.
if you're doing a book, if you're playing 2/4 and you write in 4/4, the 8 notes is going to become a 16 notes. It's going to double the value. You know, and I said, and
Yes.
Bob was, no, Duduka, we don't need it on the, because at that time, Tom, we didn't have Pro Tools. We're talking about the 90s,
Hmm.
early 90s. We didn't have Pro
Yeah.
Tools. So what? And I insist, no, Bob, I'm gonna do it. 106, 107 exercise, So I need to go. I had a code. I need to go to the studio. They put the exercise, the pattern that I play in the middle, so I count 1, 2, 1
Hmm.
and 2 and 1, 2, 1 and 2 and then I did
Yes.
that, and with the mouse of the Macintosh, they pull my from the DAT, they pull my voice for right before the exercise. It took 72 hours.
Ah.
What now would take like 1 hour, one and a half
Wow.
hours. It took 72 hours to do that. Anyway, I did, and I came
Man.
home. At that time, my 41 years old daughter, Alana, was 9 years old or something like that. And I show her, look, I redid all the countings. Check it out. See if you like. 1, 2, 1. I said, Dad, because her mother, she's American. Her mother, it's not 2, it's 2. 1, 2. I said, come on, give me a break, It's not 2. I said, no, no, now it's done. And so we did that. If you notice,
Yeah.
you have that counting, that sometimes is a
Oh,
little,
yeah.
the precision
Yep.
is not 100% because, but because you
Yeah.
didn't have the Pro Tools or elements, technological elements to do in a faster. But I
I
think
think
it's
it's good
good
enough.
enough. And then, we did
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and I'm very happy, and Bob too. And I think we
You should
help,
be. It's a wonderful book, man.
many people's. We told we also did a lot of research in the history of Brazilian music, which is very
Yeah.
important. It's
Yeah. I
very
love that part
important,
of it.
to
Yes.
anyone that's attempt to play Brazilian music. I think it's very important to research, to go through the history, how the
Yes.
things, not just from bossa nova, but from much before, because what most of people are not aware is that since the early 20th century, Brazil, like 1911, 1912, or that time, Brazil was exporting machixe, was a rhythm that was before samba, was exporting to the United States. Ernesto Nazaré, a composer, was composed and sent this music, and the Castle Brothers. You even can find Castle Brothers. They were dancers. They used to dance to those
Yes.
Brazilian songs. So it goes back.
Yes,
It goes
absolutely.
back
I'm very
like
familiar.
from the beginning of the 20th century, and then after that we had the Carmen Miranda in the 40s, the phenomenon Carmen Miranda, and then we had the bossa nova in the 60s, and then we have the revival of bossa nova and the samba jazz, in the 80s, or something like that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
but before that, it's fascinating to see the history of Brazilian music, to read. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
read
For
when
sure.
we were doing Emily Morfield, wrote the introduction, but we got many times together because I use a book by I forgot. I use this book here, you know, uh, Dicionário Musical Brasileiro by Mário de
Oh, wow.
Andrade is a thick book, and they have
Yeah. Yeah.
all the the elements, not all, but a lot, of the elements of
Mhm.
like for instance, all the elements of Brazilian, like rhythms and partida, partitura. They had something I want to show, but it's hard to find now. About Partido Alto, but it's a
That's okay.
great
That's
book.
all right.
And I could not recommend
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, for
But you
sure.
need to read Portuguese. Mário de
Wonderful.
Andrade was a great writer and a
Yeah.
researcher of music all over Brazil, and he has a collection of folkloric
Gotcha.
Brazilian music, that he recorded by traveling
Wow.
Brazil and record with
Yeah.
equipment. I think he import from Switzerland, recording. The very old,
Yeah.
Switzerland
Yeah.
record, like kind of Neumann or whatever was the name.
It's very similar to the
Yes,
folkways recordings
and
here
you
in the
know
United
what? Another
States.
important thing. My mind is flying, but when the first American jazz tune was recorded in 1917, is registered. When the first
Yes.
samba was recorded in Brazil? 1917, the
No.
same year by Donga.
Really?
Pelo
Wow.
Telefone
Ah.
is the name of the song, by the telephone,
Okay.
Pelo Telefone. So it's a very coincidence.
Wow.
And I think the union,
Yeah, that's amazing.
the mixing of the Brazilian and the jazz music is fantastic. Because they used to ask to Jobim,
Yeah.
uh, but your music have some jazz elements? I said, look, I like very much jazz, but like Gershwin, many, Duke Ellington, many composers, American composers, I also listen to Chopin, to
Mhm.
Debussy, to Ravel. So those chords with
Wow.
nine, and things, I heard from classical music,
Yes.
because he wrote classical music,
Yeah. Yeah.
and has a lot of classical influence, like
Absolutely.
Americans, besides the African rhythms that they both have,
Sure.
even
Mhm.
from different parts of Africa, from the African continent, have a lot of harmonic, European, East and Western European influence.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. Yes.
well, that's why I think it's so beautiful. You see Miles Davis record Brazil album of Brazilian music. So many are Bill Evans, and so many
Sure.
great artists.
It's a very big part
They
of American
recorded
music
Stan
now. Yeah.
Getz, and the
Yeah.
Stan Getz was the one. I had the privilege to play with him and Astrid. When I was playing with Astrid,
Yeah.
was the one that through that album, Get
Yes.
Gilberto, was able to, make the bossa nova worldwide famous. But before that, bossa nova in the late
Yeah.
50s was already a big hit and was created in Rio de Janeiro, like choro music that was before bossa nova was created in Rio. Rio was the capital of
Mm-hmm.
Brazil before Brasilia. When I was born, Brasilia became the capital in
Yes.
1960, but before that was Rio de Janeiro. And Rio was the cultural center
Yeah.
of Brazil and used to export music to all over Brazil. So things change,
Yeah.
but now, São Paulo and Bahia, and, they have their own, but Rio
Yeah.
at the time, Rio was. And the samba too. The samba, was, it came from Africa and was developed to Bahia and was developed in Rio de Janeiro. So no
Yeah.
one plays samba the way we play, the style that we play in Rio de Janeiro, not because I'm from Rio, but it's different. I'm not judging which is better, which is not better.
Sure.
In Sao Paulo and all over Brazil, they
Sure.
have great musicians that play
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But Rio was the,
Yeah. You
yes,
know,
tell me.
no, no, no. I was just going to say, speaking of American musicians, the last time, that I saw you in person, we were both on the same bill at Manchester Craftsman's Guild.
Oh,
We were playing with the great Rufus Reed, and you actually you gave me probably the best piece of advice I've ever gotten about playing Brazilian music. You were talking about how a lot of times American drummers, when they play the bass drum, they play the notes
sometimes.
too close together. And you were telling me,
Yes,
you were
yes.
saying, think of it like it's in 6/8. 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6.
Yeah.
That's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. Could you talk a little bit about some of the important elements of playing that kind of music on the drums? What are some of the things people
With
should
so
should
many
should know
things,
about?
with so many things. For me,
Yeah, I
the
know, I
guy
know.
that was like our Brazilian Kenny Clark and Roy Haynes and Max Roach was the great innovator was Edson Machado. Because before, like in jazz, we used to play the drums around the drum, samba around the drums, and the cymbal just to make
Hmm.
some accents. But we used to play in the snares, like
Ah,
some tagada 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 tagada. And the history said that Edson Machado was playing in a dance ball, and he was playing the snares and the drums using the cymbals to play melodic, just the accents, and his snare broke the head. So everything he was doing the snare, he started doing the cymbal. And he was the first
oh,
one
wow.
that introduced, that's a little polemic there. Some people say that was Godofredo, some about the bass drum, the ostinato, dum 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 dum, to incorporate that, because people used to play like takashika dum dum dum,
Hmm.
the bass drum like the sword,
Like the
like the
surdo.
sword. One, two, one and not two, one and not
Yeah.
two. And then Machado started to do to dum, and then in 1964, in our album Rio 65 Trio with Dom Salvador and Sergio Barroso, he started to use the bass drums to play melodic accents. That was amazing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So just playing, if you hear that album,
Yeah.
look for Rio 65 Trio with Dom Salvador, Edson Machado, and Sergio Barroso Neto. It's an amazing album.
Yeah. It's a great
And from
record.
that point on,
Yeah.
in the 70s, I started to experience doing that, to use the bass drum, just playing melodic accents. When I come to America in 75 and I started to
Wow.
play with American musicians, non Brazilian musicians, They asked me, "Can you play the ostinato in the bass drum?" I said, "Because we can't understand very much, you know. We need that foundation." I said, "Okay." So I have nothing against playing the ostinato on the
Wow.
bass drum. It's fine, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also fine to use the bass drum once you really know the foundation of the music. To use the bass drum, you can feather
Mm-hmm.
the ostinato feather like you do playing straight ahead, and then play accents. You know,
That was one of the first things I noticed when I got a chance to see you play live. I was fascinated by that fact that you weren't playing that ostinato all the
because
time. I had never
you
seen
like
that
you're
before.
gonna take away from the bass player. You know, in a situation like that with Rufus, as a matter of fact, you know, we have an album I did with Rufus. Well, it's coming out right now on
Yes.
Sunny Side, also with a string
Yeah.
quartet, serious string quartet,
Yes.
and it's very good because I had a chance to play some straight ahead with a great bass player. But before that, the first bass
Sure.
player that I had to play, and I played in his group for like 4 years, 3, 4 years, was Eddie Gomez. You know, was the first time that I played with a great bass player playing straight ahead. And he's very much different than
Mm-hmm.
Rufus playing. Even Rufus is a big fan of Eddie Gomez, and vice versa, I believe. You know,
Right.
it's a very two different conceptions.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to play with those guys,
Yeah.
it, because when you come to another country and you Brazilian, they stamp okay Brazilian music, and then they start to call you to do the Brazilian, you know, recording, which is fine. I did with Phil Woods, with Jerry Mulligan, with
Sure.
all those guys. It's fine. With Schofield, with many of
Yeah.
them. It's fine. But I love to play straight ahead too.
Yeah.
And thank God I had a chance to play and record. I record a few albums with Rufus, you know, and playing straight ahead. And I had the chance also to share with him and the great Steve Ali, piano player, uh, a little knowledge that I have, some knowledge that I have of Brazilian music, you know. So to tell them, you know, because they ask me,
Sure.
is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? And I had the knowledge. I had the I was able to playing with them, not talking much, but playing. They understand the and what's a baião. They didn't know exactly what was a baião, you know, from the northeast of Brazil. And I brought some tunes, especially on the first album that we did, that called Rufus Reed Out Front Trio. It's just the trio. That I brought some
Mm-hmm.
tunes like
Right.
samba, partido alto, baião. So, and it was a learning experience for both sides. For me to play with great American musicians, because
Yes.
it's different, Tom. When you play samba with Brazilian
Yeah.
musicians, is one thing. Is one thing with musicians that you like. Is one thing. When you play jazz with Brazilian musicians, it's not the same as you playing jazz with American musicians. It's another thing. Also, when you play jazz or
Sure.
when you play Brazilian rhythms with American musicians, you need naturally to do accommodation, you know, which is fine because my
Mm-hmm.
goal is to blend, to mix in equal parts those rhythms, which is fine. So it's always a
Yeah.
learning
Sure.
experience, you know, and I
Yeah,
just
man.
love doing that, you know, and
No, it's I think you have done that better than almost everyone as far as the drummers from Brazil. You're one of the great masters of that music. But you, as you said, you have such a love for straight ahead and such a great understanding of
Yes,
it. You've really been
but
able to
like I
blend both of
said,
them
Tom, it's
together.
important. I don't want to sound like a teacher or a repeating machine. For
No,
every drummer, every musician, not just drummer, interest to play Brazilian music, that's non-Brazilian, can be French, can be German, can be American, can be anyone. Go look at the history of the music. Learn how the people used to play before. You know, from the first recording, 1917, learn how the drums used to be played until
hmm
today, the evolution of the drum. If you can speak Portuguese, it's even better because speaking Portuguese, you're gonna somehow the language it help you to understand the culture more.
yes,
And if you can go to Brazil, not
yes,
right now,
you're
the
totally
president
right.
is terrible, Wait for the next president. I'm sorry about some people that don't, but
That's
the
okay.
president for me is not good. He he doesn't
Yeah, for
support
me either.
arts. He cut the culture
Right.
how I say Ministry of Culture thing. The movies,
Yes.
he doesn't. He used to be from the army, you know,
Yeah.
and he's a very tough guy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he
I hear
wants
you.
to be a tropical whatever. I'm not going to say the
Yeah.
name because some people here are Republicans, but so it's better I don't get in problem.
It's all good. That's okay. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things you've been doing recently, and I wanted to start by I know you've had this group for a while, but could you talk about Trio de Paz with
Trio
Homero
da
and
Paz
Nilsson? That's such a
is like
wonderful
we've been
group.
over 30 years together since 1986. That make us 34 years together. It's like a marriage.
Wow,
It's like an old marriage.
that
Yeah,
is
but
that's a
sometimes we
long
fight a
time, man.
lot
Trio
because
of
we're
peace,
too long
right? Trio of
together.
peace.
Like any man, but we love each other. We just play. Uh,
Yeah,
we play a week at Dizzy's,
you
and
guys at
this time
Dizzy's?
usually Joe Locke, Claudio Roditi,
Yeah,
Joe Locke before Claudio Roditi, and Harry Allen, and
was Harry Allen playing with
Harry
you guys?
always. Harry, my
Yeah,
wife, Mausha Diné, Trio da Paz and friends. This time, Randy Brecker was supposed to play, but
yeah,
he had some, traveling he really wanted to do, but he had some and so we
yeah.
call a great guy that's a piano player from Brazil and accordion player. So it changed completely the vibe of the
Ah,
trio when we play together. We
wow.
play songs just the trio and we play with him.
Yes.
Since he's from a very much younger generation,
Wow.
because in the trio, Nilsson is the older one.
Mm-hmm.
He's a couple of years older than me. I'm 71, and Homer is the younger one. It doesn't look that way, but that's the
Mm-hmm.
way it is.
Yeah.
And since Vitor
I
Gonçalves
got
is
you.
his name, he's from a younger generation. He's 40 years old or 40 something. You know, he has some new
Mm-hmm.
harmonic conceptions in mind and things like that. So he took
Oh,
out
wow.
in a very
Yeah.
good way, you know, like say Trio da Paz from the comfort zone that we playing
Yeah.
together for so long, and it gave you
Yeah.
a different perspective.
Sure.
It made us to reach for something else, which
Yes.
was a great learning experience, and
Yeah.
it was great to play with him. And his accordion
That's
player
wonderful.
is amazing, and the
Yeah.
sound, I love. And he's
Yeah.
from Brazil. He understands all
Yeah.
because some of the other guys, Harry Allen is great because Harry study and Harry understand Brazilian music. and Claudio too. But some of the guys, they
Yes.
play
Yes. Yes.
in 2/4, but they think in 4/4. They don't think in 2/4. They think in 4/4, and
Ah, gotcha.
that's one thing that I insist. I think is fine. Even when you tap your foot, don't do it like do like
Yeah.
like for the piano player, for instance. If he's not using too much the sustain pedal, which is a
Yes.
problem sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's kind of wrap up by talking about your brand new record that's going to be out in October. Could you talk about that? It's a
It
really
is.
great
I
project with
love
your quartet, yeah?
those guys. They moved to New York before the pandemic. In 2019. One study at the New School.
Mhm.
Fantastic guitar player from São Paulo. I think the same
Mhm.
level as Romero, as Chico
Yes, he's
Pinheiro.
fantastic.
Those Brazilian guys. These guys, Vinicius Gomes, he's amazing. And the bass player, he used to live in
Yeah.
Germany, in Berlin, and then he used to live a lot in France,
Mhm.
in Paris. So he moved here
Gotcha.
before the pandemic too. And one time I went to see a friend of mine playing at Central Park, Dom Salvador, the piano player. And after that, we are hanging together
Mhm.
at
Yes.
Central Park this summer, like a couple years ago or something. And so let's have a beer. Blah, blah, blah. Salvador, yeah, I mean, he's 84 now. He took so long for him to get dressed, to
Wow.
change his clothes, like anyway. But then we went
Yeah.
out, and Vinicius, the guitar player, and Gilly, they came to me and said, Duduka, we want to play with you. Can we rent a studio and we play?
Wow.
And I felt very flattered. I wrote that in the liner notes. I felt, my God, those young guys,
Yes.
is very good. And I said, instead of rent a studio, how about we do a few rehearsals at my house, because I have a Fender Rhodes here, and do snare just to get the form of the tunes and the tunes
Mhm.
and my ideas that I have in mind. And then we start to
Sure.
get gigs, like underground gigs. I'm talking about place in Queens, place in Brooklyn, place,
Sure.
beautiful place, but underground. It's not like this is club or the Blue Note.
Yeah.
Or we just want to play. And we play, and the
Yes.
bass player recorded
Yeah.
every time we played. So I listen to everything, and that make me
Wow.
aware of what was working, what was not working. And then I start to play, and rehearse and rehearse.
Uh-huh.
I start to select a repertoire. And then I did something that I learned from Herbie Mann, from the
Yeah.
time that I used to play with the late Herbie Mann. We started playing together, Trio da Paz and Herbie Mann, and he said, let's do an album. In fact, it wasn't Trio da Paz. It was Romero, me, Mark Soskin, and Paul Sokolov. And Claudio Roditi did a couple tracks
Ah, yeah.
as a special guest. And then Herbie said, we are going to Hawaii. We're going to spend a lot of time on the road. And he said, before we traveling, I want to do an album. I said, but Herbie, why don't you wait? We're going to be playing every night, for like a couple months. It's going to sound much better when we come back. And he said to me, it
Sure.
was a lesson he told me. That's why I record with my quartet, thanks to Herbie Mann. He said, yes, Duduka, we might be playing better, but
Wow.
the freshness that we're having now, it will never happen again. It's like, it's like if you want to have a seat
Oh, wow.
when you meet someone that you love, you know, the first months of the relationship,
Sure.
the first year, you know, things change